All right, y'all, you're locked on Falcons. I'm your host, Aaron Freeman. The Falcons got their third win of the season in week 6 against the 49ers. We'll talk about Mariota's best day so far, the opportunistic defense, and you'll even get me to admit I was wrong about this team and talk about exactly why this Falcons team is exceeding everybody's expectations this year.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you know me. I'm Aaron Freeman, the humble host of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast, aka Sirius Black, aka Mr. Drew. And I want to tell you that today's episode of Locked On Falcons is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. So, guys, we thank you for making Locked On Falcons your first listen, although I'm sure many of you are checking us out on Sunday evening as probably your last listen of the day in today's rapid reaction to the Falcons week 6 win over the 49ers by a score of 28-14. But of course, you can check out Locked On Falcons Monday through Friday on a variety of podcast platforms, including Apple, Odyssey, Google, Spotify, and of course on YouTube. Check us out on Locked On Falcons YouTube channel, subscribe, hit that bell, give us a like, all that and more. That really helps us out. But let's jump into this game. And it was really about the Falcons sort of establishing their identity, continuing to be one of the best running teams in the NFL with 168 yards rushing on the ground. You got contributions from Caleb Huntley, who led the team with 59 yards. You had Tyler Algier getting 51 yards. You also had 50 yards from Marcus Mariota. And let's talk about Mariota. We talked about last week him, despite not having a great box score, probably having his best game to date. Well, he was even better this Sunday. Again, you look at the box score, you see only 14 attempted passes, but he was able to complete 13 of those for 129 yards. And again, you just want a clean, efficient football game from Mariota, managing the football game, and that's what we got on Sunday. We know that this team's offensive identity is going to live and die by the running game, and we're going to continue to see that, what we saw on Sunday, which is a team that ran the ball 40 times and only threw the ball 14 times. But that is their formula for success. Maybe there's going to be a future opponent. I'm sure, odds are certainly at least one team along the way is probably going to be able to slow down this running game. And then that's going to be a situation where, the game is going to be put on Mariota's shoulders and he's going to have to throw to win for the Falcons. But we will cross that bridge if we get to it. And so I think, this was a good game that showcased what this identity is. You saw pretty much every, offensive scoring drive. The offense got 3 scores in this game. Mariota threw for 2, ran for 1, but every single one of those scoring drives included a Mariota run or scramble on a third down for a first down. So his legs were instrumental in sort of keeping the chains moving. So even though his arm wasn't a big part of the Falcons game plan, I certainly think his legs were instrumental in the Falcons' success. One of those touchdowns was to Kyle Pitts. We finally got the Kyle Pitts touchdown that we've all been clamoring for weeks and weeks. And this was an instance where Mariota did the right thing. Right. All right. Like I remember watching the play live. The Falcons lined up basically in a 3-by-1 set. They motioned a receiver away from Kyle Pitts' side, who was sort of singled up on the left side. And so you could see, okay, he's going to get single coverage on this situation. And so when Mariota drops back and turns, opens up to the right, I'm like, in my head, I'm screaming. I'm like, no, this is the one time you got Kyle Pitts singled up on the one side. But it was all part of a pump fake to try to sort of hold the defense in the middle of the field so that Pitts could run that backside dig, and Mariota wound up hitting him. And it probably only took like maybe a second for Mariota to go from that pump to get the ball back. to Pitts but that second felt like 8 seconds. And I was just sitting there going like, oh my God, if he does not hit Kyle Pitts in this situation, you guys are going to see me on the news. They're going to show my mugshot, me just being like this. And it's going to be like a man shanked Marcus Mariota in the parking lot after the Falcons game if he had missed that. But thankfully, I'm not going to jail. Mariota hit that touchdown pass, and Pitts got his first score. And so at least for a week, we we will see the fantasy folks off of Pitts' back, and I will not be going to jail. But yeah, that play, I think, was just kind of like, it's the Mariota coaster in a nutshell, as some person termed it to me on Twitter. But Pitt scored. Michael Pruitt got the first score of the game on the Falcons opening drive, and you're sitting here going like, really, they designed to play for Michael Pruitt before they got Kyle Pitts. But fortunately, they got the redemption a little bit later with that Kyle Pitts touchdown. So I think it's all mostly smiles for me for the offense. If I was going to nitpick anything offensively, it did feel like the pressure was getting a little bit too much on the few instances the Falcons drop back the pass. That's been a sort of a through line these last couple of weeks. So that will be something to keep an eye on. Certainly when I watch the film later this week, but we'll sort of flip the script and talk about the opportunistic defense that the Falcons showed, being able to turn the ball over 3 times in this game and taking full advantage of those turnovers on Sunday against this 49ers team. But before we get into that, guys, let me plug the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast feed, where you can find 3 shows with 4 hosts breaking down not only local sports but national sports. And of course, Locked On Sports Atlanta is the home for, unfortunately for the Braves, only the Locked On Falcons postcast, where myself, Jarvis Davis, the co-host of ATL Day Ones on the Locked On Sports Atlanta, we are coming at you live Sunday after every Falcon game to give you that immediate reaction. If you can't wait, a couple of hours for this rapid reaction, which is a not so rapid reaction, then you got to check out Locked On Sports Atlanta immediately after the game. Subscribe on YouTube to watch that live. Hit that bell, give them a like, all that stuff and more, so that you know when we go live. And guys, as I get older and as I'm dealing with the stress of Mariota's going through his progressions on backside digs, and I'm trying to stay in shape so that I can handle that stress a little bit better. But as I've gotten older, staying in shape has been hard for me, and I'm sure it's been hard for many of you guys out there who've had similar struggles. But I've recently learned it's not your fault. As men age, our bodies naturally lose free testosterone. It happens to all of us, and it can make it harder to stay in shape and be energetic and active. But now there's a way to counter that negative physical effects of aging, and it's Nugenix Total T Testosterone Booster with Testofen. It'll help you turn back the clock, re-energize your workouts, and get you the better results in the gym that's going to make you look and feel like the man you want to be. You'll feel stronger, leaner, and have more energy and drive, and you'll have more passion for your partner that she will notice as well. Re-energize your life with a complimentary bottle of Nugenix Total T when you text NFL to 231231. Text now and you'll get a free bottle of Nugenix Thermo, their most powerful fat incinerator ever, with key ingredients that help you get back into shape fast. Just text NFL to 231231. Text NFL to 231231. And our next partner has a product that I use every day. I started taking AG1 because I realized I can be healthier these days. And AG1 is basically a multivitamin where I don't have to take a million different little pills. It's just 1 scoop of AG1 with a cup of water first thing in the morning, and my day starts off right. Included in AG1 is 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens in a special blend of ingredients that's going to improve gut health, my immune system. It's going to boost energy. It's going to boost recovery and focus throughout the day. And you too can reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition with AG1. And making it easier for you, Athletic Greens is going to give you the free year-long supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs of AG1 with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NFL network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NFL network to take ownership of your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. So guys, let's talk about the defense and their performance on Sunday. And it's really all about opportunity in turnovers, right? Now, let's go back to the Friday episode that we did here on Locked On Falcons with Jarvis Davis, my Locked On Falcons postcast co-host, as well as my weekly co-host here on the Friday episodes. And we gave some bold predictions. Jarvis wanted to see sacks from both Grady Jarrett and Taquan Graham. That did not come true. The Falcons did in this game with 0 sacks, although Grady Jarrett did have a sack that was wiped out by a penalty in this game. The pressure just wasn't quite there for the Falcons in this game, but it didn't prove to be a huge problem for the team because the coverage was so good on the back end. And that was kind of where my bold prediction was concerned. I sort of said we'd pick off Jimmy Garoppolo twice in this game. That bold prediction did come true, although I did predict specifically AJ Terrell would get one of those, and either Richie Grant or Troy Anderson would get the other. Instead, Isaiah Oliver got one in this game, got one at the end of the first half where Jimmy G tried to force it into triple coverage in the closing seconds to try to get the 49ers into field goal range, and Oliver picked it off. And then you had a Jalen Hawkins interception at the beginning of the fourth quarter that came off a tip pass from Darren Hall. Notably, Hall was in the game because AJ Terrell had exited the game with a hamstring injury that he suffered on an opening drive in the second half. You also had in the fourth quarter, Casey Hayward exiting the game with a shoulder injury. Didn't seem like Terrell's injury was that serious. It seemed like they were kind of, being careful in keeping that rested. But he was backed out there on the sideline, just sort of watching in the second half. But Hayward's injury, I think, is definitely one that we need to keep an eye on. Just kind of when he was being helped off the field and he was kind of holding that shoulder gingerly, didn't see like he could support the full weight of his arm fully with the way sort of the trainer was holding him at that point. So that's going to be something that we need to definitely keep an eye on moving forward. And Oliver also exited the game as well with an undisclosed injury. He was kind of limping off the field immediately after that Hayward injury. So it did seem like, we talked about how beat up this 49ers defense was going into the week. We know Nick Bosa. They were down like 6 or 7 starters on defense alone in this game. But it did feel like, sort of that bad mojo sort of passed off and was passed on to the Falcons secondary. But I do think Darren Hall stepped up, made some key plays. One of the things that we talked about in the offseason was I wasn't really sold on Darren Hall's potential to be this outside cornerback. And that's part of the reason why I was, hoping that D. Alford could step into that role. But the fact is that Hall has been in and out of the lineup all throughout the season. There's been nagging injuries that have caused Terrell to miss time as well as Hayward to miss time. And to me, there has not been a massive drop off from those guys to Darren Hall. So I think that's a kudos to him outperforming my expectations. We'll talk about how the team overall has sort of outperformed my expectations as we continue today. But again, it was another sort of classic bend but don't break game for the Falcons defense. They were able to keep the 49ers ground game in check, which I think was critical. They were creating those turnovers, 2 interceptions, and they also got a defensive touchdown on a fumble recovery on the 49ers second possession. That was a play where Jeff Wilson fumbled the ball. I think Rashaan Evans was given official credit for forcing that fumble. AJ Terrell sort of scooped it up and then ran it towards the end zone, kind of dove for the end zone, reached out and tried to stretch the ball out, but fumbled the ball into the end zone. But fortunately, it didn't go out of bounds for a touchback. And Jalen Hawkins was in the right place at the right time, fell on it for the touchdown. Jalen Hawkins was in the right place at the right time for that interception on the Darren Hall tip as well. So it was a right place, right time type of performance for Jalen Hawkins, who I know had gotten a little bit of criticism from certain fans online over the last week or two. So it was certainly a big boost for him in this game. The other thing that stood out for the defense in this game was late in the fourth quarter with the 49ers down 28-14 and needing to go down the field and get a score to get back into this game. The 49ers went on this 8-minute drive in the fourth quarter, beginning around the 11-minute mark in the fourth quarter with 11 minutes left in the game, or 10 minutes and 42 seconds left in the game. And that drive kind of embodied the bend but don't break mentality that we've seen from this Falcons defense all year long and under Dean Pease, right? It was a lot of short gains for the 49ers, and the Falcons were like, oh, we'll give you those short gains, right? because not only the scoreboard as well as time is on our side. We're up 2 scores. You need to get scores quickly, and that drive ultimately ended in the Falcons getting a 4th down stop. They were able to get a stop on the 3rd and 1. They were able to get a stop on a 4th and 1 in the red zone, and so that's, to me, the embodiment of that bend but don't break style of defense. You saw 3 penalties from 49ers center Jake Brindle on that play, and I only bring that up because it did feel like a little bit that the refs were a little bit on our side this week, unlike last week. I wouldn't sit here and say that any of Brindle's penalties were bad calls or anything, although a couple of ticky-tack defensive holding and a favorable spot here or two earlier in the game. But it did feel like the refs and the NFL got together and like, okay, we're going to help out. We're going to hook up the Falcons this week after last week's debacle. Certainly, we're not forgiving them for that, but we were owed a little bit of something. And so hopefully we'll be owed a little bit more to sort of make up for that. Let's get like 2 OPIs against Jamar Chase this upcoming week. And maybe we'll call it even at that point in time if the Falcons can come away with a win or something like that. But, in all seriousness, again, I think a pretty solid day for the Falcons defense. It wasn't great, but again, that bend but don't break style of defense, I think, really showed up. And we will wrap up today's episode, guys, where I have to admit that I was wrong about this football team. Oh God, it's so hard to say. And we'll talk about exactly why, and that will allow us to focus on this team's identity and how much better this team has been in the trenches this year. And we'll get into all of that, guys, as we continue today's Locked On Falcons episode, guys. But before we get there, I do want to plug that Locked On Sports Atlanta not only is on your preferred podcast platform, but it's also you can download the Locked On Sports Atlanta app if you have Roku or Amazon Fire TV. You're getting that same great local coverage 24/7 for free. Just download Locked On Sports Atlanta app today on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And guys, I also want to tell you about Prize Picks, a fun new way to play daily fantasy. All you got to do is pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. I know a person that had a 4-pick entry this week and had more for Mariota for 29.5 yards rushing, more for George Kittle and 44.5 yards receiving, more for Jimmy Garoppolo and 0.5 interceptions. And then unfortunately, he also had more for Drake London, 48.5 yards receiving, and 3 out of those 4 went wrong. But Drake decided he wanted to come up a little bit short, so a certain somebody was not able to win 10 times their entry. But you guys can take my advice or do better than me by going to Prize Picks, and you not only can play NFL, you can play MLB, NBA, NHL, PGA, college football, so much more. It's safe, it's easy at Prize Picks. It's currently in operation in over 30 states in the US and Canada. All you got to do is download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up. Play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That means if you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. All you got to do is use that promo code Locked On to sign up for an instant deposit match at sign up to $100. So, guys, also want to thank you guys for making Locked On Falcons your first listen. Check out Locked On NFL as your second listen, especially today, to get the recap and lowdown on all things NFL from around the league on Sunday. But let's talk about this Falcons team identity. And before we get into that, I do want to talk about, it'll be interesting when I go back and watch the All-22 this week, because I think my conclusion probably will be just watching the game live on Sunday. And we'll see if this gets confirmed on film, that I'll probably look at and see a whole bunch of plays that the 49ers, had opportunities to get back into this game and win this game, but they didn't take advantage of that. I know there was a couple of deep balls that were dropped. I know there was a 39-yard play to Brandon Ayuk on that long drive in the fourth quarter that was wiped out by that Jake Brindle penalty. Shout out to Abdullah Anderson for drawing that holding call on that. I know Jimmy Garoppolo missed an open George Kittle in the end zone just before those 2 short yardage stops at the end of that drive as well. And I say all that not to be negative, as I'm sure some people will interpret that, but I say that because to me, the fact that the 49ers weren't able to take advantage of their opportunities, but the Falcons were, shows me how far this team has come and the level of competence that they've had and brought to the table this year, right? You're looking at a team that has a pretty simple, basic offensive game plan. It's like, we're going to run the ball down your throat and we challenge you to stop us. And the 49ers weren't able to do that. And several teams so far this year have not had success doing that. You have a team that's a defense. We're going to play bend but don't break defense, but you're going to wind up hurting yourself before, we hurt you guys we're not going to give up the big plays. You're going to get we're going to get stops on third downs. We're going to get stops on fourth downs. We're going to get stops in the red zone. The thing that stood out to me in this game was like Arnold Ebiketie probably had his best game of the year. I'll be curious to see if that is confirmed on the film. But you didn't see any sacks. You didn't see a ton of pressure in this game because as is gone throughout the season, when Grady Jarrett's not basically putting the cape on and being this pass rusher, the pass rush is pretty non-existent. Right. But, again, it's this bend but don't break identity that this Falcons have. And, you can look at this formula that this team is showing with their sort of run centric offense and their bend but don't break style of defense. We can sit here and debate all day long if that has a high enough ceiling to be a playoff team. But rather than focusing on the short term of, can it be a team that can be playing in January? To me, what it tells me, regardless of what the answer to that question is like, I feel like this team is set up for long-term success. That the fact that they are actually going out there and doing the things that they need to do to win football games, to show that they are a well-coached football team, that they have a game plan and they're going out there and executing that game plan, to me embodies what you look for in a well-coached football team. The fact that they're out there being competitive in every single game for all four quarters, regardless of who they're facing, whether it's a Super Bowl aspiring team like Tampa Bay or it's a struggling team like the Seahawks or whoever you want to throw out there, the 49ers, given all their injuries or whatever, but they took care of business against this 49er team. We sat here and we said going into this week, like, hey, this is a beat up 49ers team. The Falcons should be able to take advantage of that. And they were able to do that. And I like the fact that this team is able to do that. And it goes back to the conversation you guys know that we had all off season long, where frequently on this podcast, I was expressing my skepticism, some call it negativity, about this football team because we were not getting this level of competence and execution from last year's team. And I'm like, that has to change for this team to be right. And like, it was funny to me because like all off season long, all I heard was like, hey, we got taller wide receivers and hey, we got these bigger linebackers. Our linebackers are 5 pounds heavier than they were a year ago. Aren't we a physical football team? And I'm just going like, what are you guys on? Like the physicality of this football team is established in the trenches. And I said this in August, like if you're buying stock on this football team, you're buying stock on the notion that this is not going to be a bottom 5 offensive line like so many people thought it would be, that it was not going to be a bottom 5 defensive line like so many people thought it would be. And they haven't been those things. And that's where the physicality from this football team has come from. And that's where I will sit here and say, I was wrong. I was not buying stock on this football team. And I don't think many of you guys were buying stock on it because you kept talking about how tall our wide receivers are and how much bigger our linebackers are, because you didn't want to talk about the fact that you still had major concerns for this team in the trenches. I still think they have a ways to go in terms of the trenches, and we'll probably still see this team invest significant dollars and draft picks in that area of the roster next offseason. But the fact that they have gone from this point where we're no longer a team that's at the bottom of the league in terms of their trench play, and we're now at a team that's middle of the pack, competent at the very least, wherever you want to stack them, that's where they are, and it goes back to a conversation we had at the end of June, where it's like, if you're going to buy in on this offensive line, you're basically buying all the Dwayne Ledford stock that there is. And right now, like the Dwayne Ledford stock is through the roof so far, guys, right? Dwayne Ledford being the Falcons offensive line coach, getting this offensive line, Caleb McGarry playing his best football, Elijah Wilkinson going from a journeyman backup right tackle to a league average starting left guard, Drew Dahlman being a solid center, a guy that looks like he could be a long-term fixture. Hasn't been great this year, but looks like a guy that, with development could be a long-term fixture at that center spot. Obviously, Chris Lindstrom having an outstanding year, ascending to be one of the best guards in the league. And you have Jake Matthews, again, not necessarily showing, like, this is not peak Jake Matthews that we've seen in previous years, but you're getting solid play, especially in the run game. I know there was a specific play I can't remember when it was. I want to say it was in the second half where him and Wilkinson had this combo block and they sort of cleared out the lane and Huntley or whoever, Algier, ran behind him for like a 6 or 7 yard gain. That did not happen at all last year. And the fact that we're seeing this from this offensive line, the fact that this defensive line, we talked about Ebiketie coming forward. We talked about Grady Jarrett getting back to playing at an all pro level. Taquan Graham stepping up and looking like a difference maker up front. So that's really the onus behind this team's improvement. To me, the trenches look like they're a competent football team, and kudos to Arthur Smith, kudos to Gary Emanuel, kudos to Dwayne Ledford and all these people, Dean Pease, etc., that were able to get this team that everybody, as Arthur Smith would say, they buried us back in May. And it was like, yeah, we looked at this unit and we're like, what is this? Like, this is really what you're doing. You're running it back with the same starting five. And obviously they made a couple of changes along the way, but it was just like, really? Like, this is your plan? And it's showing up so far. So kudos to this coaching staff and to all those knuckleheads out there that were skeptical and downing and expressing their negativity. I hope you guys just don't have to listen to that nonsense on a daily podcast ever again. So we'll see here on this daily podcast. Couldn't have been me, not me possibly saying those things, but we'll see what happens for this football team moving forward. We'll have another challenge for us this week against the Bengals. We'll see if they can do it again and still thrive in the trenches against a tough Bengals opponent as things move forward. We'll see what the cornerback injuries look like, because obviously you don't want to be down your best corners next week when Jamar Chase is coming to town, but hopefully the refs will hook us up in that regard with some OPIs or something along those lines. But we're hoping to see that Chase Terrell rematch. I think I know I am. I want to see what happens with that, because I know AJ Terrell's gonna definitely bring it in that matchup. He's like, you caused an entire part of the country to doubt that I was a good at football, and most of America thinking I was a bad draft pick. Jamar Chase, I got something for you. So I hope we get to see that rematch, guys, and I hope to hear you guys and see you guys and get your feedback on this game, as well as upcoming feedback, some of the things you want me to focus on when I sit down and watch the film Tuesday morning. Of course, you can hit me up on Twitter or Facebook at Locked On Falcons. Send an email to lockedonfalcons@mail.com. You can also check me out in the Locked On Falcons Discord. Of course, leave a comment here on the Locked On Falcons YouTube page as well. So that's what we'll do next later this week. We'll hopefully have a guest on tomorrow. Haven't had that confirmed, so we should have a guest on tomorrow's episode to recap this game, get that person's thoughts on this game. And guys, make sure you tune in as your second listen. We thank you for making Locked On Falcons your first listen, but your second listen, Peacock and Williamson, Locked On NFL, Locked On Sports Atlanta. No more Braves postcasts on Locked On Sports Atlanta, but you still check out Locked On Braves to get where things went wrong for this Braves team in the postseason and how they move forward in the offseason now that is unfortunately upon us. What's going on with the Bulldogs, Hawks, NBA season, we're pretty much on us at this point in time. So check out Locked On Hawks, Locked On Bulldogs, Locked On Sports Atlanta. So guys, that's going to do it for us here. Never let anybody tell you that I don't admit that I was